I remember the first day I got the tiny egg. It was barely the size of a chicken egg, maybe even smaller, and yet somehow it felt monumental in my hands. I placed it carefully in a small corner of the aquarium I had prepared, the water crystal clear and the tank massive, more like a miniature ocean than a home. I could hardly contain my excitement as I watched it gently wobble in the warmth, waiting for the impossible to happen. Days passed, and finally, the shell cracked. Out popped the tiniest little mosasaur I had ever seen, barely bigger than a mouse. Its scales shimmered a soft, marine blue, and its tiny tail flicked nervously as if testing the waters for the first time. I leaned closer, watching in awe as it cautiously explored its new world. Each ripple it created magnified in the huge tank, making it feel almost like a giant was moving. I introduced it slowly to the aquarium's decorations. Tiny coral structures, floating plants, even little rising bubbles became objects of fascination. The mosasaur nudged a bubble and then twirled, tail flicking with playful curiosity. I added a second creature, a tiny plesiosaur, and watched them circle each other, curious and tentative, tails curling elegantly in the water. Soon after, a miniature megalodon joined them, its tiny silhouette gliding smoothly through the open water. All three together created a delicate dance in the vast tank, their size emphasizing how enormous the world around them was. As they began to interact more naturally, I noticed subtle patterns of play. The mosasaur would chase rising bubbles, the plesiosaur would twist and loop around, and the megalodon, a little slower, followed with measured grace. I could see their personalities forming. The mosasaur bold and curious, the plesiosaur cautious yet playful, and the megalodon calm but observant. One day, I watched as the three started a playful chase near a cluster of floating plants. The mosasaur darted around sharply, the plesiosaur tried to twist out of its path, and the megalodon bumped gently into a plant. Water ripples magnified in the huge tank, sunlight streaming from above, highlighting their tiny forms. I noticed them twisting vertically, looping around decorations, occasionally glancing at me from afar as if acknowledging my presence. Then things got a little more intense. The mosasaur and the plesiosaur began a small skirmish, tails curling, sudden bursts of movement, splashes and bubbles surrounding them. I held my breath, unsure how fragile these tiny creatures were, and suddenly, the plesiosaur faltered. It floated motionless at the bottom, a solemn pause in the lively dance of the aquarium. My heart sank as I realized it had passed. I gently removed it from the tank, careful not to disturb the water too much, leaving the mosasaur and megalodon hovering nearby, silent and still for a moment. The mood had shifted. Curiosity had given way to a quiet tension, as if they understood the gravity of what had happened. Time passed, and life continued. The remaining creatures became more cautious, gliding slowly through the water, exploring their surroundings with measured curiosity. I noticed something remarkable. They were starting to grow. The mosasaur and megalodon seemed just slightly longer, tails more pronounced, movements more confident. It was subtle at first, but undeniable. Their tiny world now felt different, the vast aquarium seeming just a little smaller in proportion to their growing bodies. And then, finally, it happened. They were growing faster now, bodies elongating gracefully through the water, tails creating larger ripples, the sheer force of their size pressing against the boundaries of the tank. The glass trembled under the pressure. Small cracks appeared along the surface, shimmering as the light hit the fractures. My heart raced. The creatures moved with curiosity, unaware of the danger, gliding near each other, exploring, playful yet powerful. The aquarium, once their safe world, now showed signs of strain. I could hardly pull my eyes away as they swam together, visibly larger, tails flicking, bodies elongated, but still small compared to me standing behind the glass. The light filtered through water and cracks, creating a cinematic scene of beauty and tension. I knew this was just the beginning. These tiny dinosaurs were growing, and soon, their world would have to grow with them, or they would burst into a new adventure of their own. The scene froze in my mind. Two mouse-sized mosasaurs, one megalodon, exploring the massive aquarium that could barely contain them, sunlight streaming through the water, the soundless tension of glass threatening to break, and the promise that their story was far from over. I leaned closer, fascinated and terrified at once, knowing I had witnessed the birth of something extraordinary, and that their growth would lead to a world none of us had yet imagined.